Hey family, it's Carlos Watson back with a very special episode. Today's guest, Bill Gates. Now, Bill has joined me 4 times in the last 6 years. We've talked about everything from love to how to handle Ebola to what he thought was the most interesting new technology coming forward. But today, I wanted to go somewhere different with him. I wanted, obviously, to talk a little bit about the pandemic, talk about climate change, talk about the new economy, and ask him whether he's finally ready to run for office. People had some concern about conspiracy theories.
The conspiracy theories have not died down. There's some plot behind this that myself or Fauci are somehow involved in.
What have you learned on questions of race?
We've got to reform that relationship between the police and these communities is often not very functional.
Bill, talk to me a little bit about Black Lives Matter.
It was an awakening to see in our country.
Talk to me a little bit about 1 or 2 of the pieces of science or technology that we should have our eye on.
I think people will be surprised. We can improve the quality of life a lot by diagnosing better and then having new treatments.
Welcome to the Carlos Watson Show. Thank you for joining me.
You bet.
Bill, what would surprise people about you?
I play a lot of tennis. I play a lot of bridge. I read a lot of books. Maybe they might expect that. I have certain areas I'm good at, but I need to hire people who are good at other things. You have to figure out what you're not good at, and an awareness of that and how you draw in others to complement your skills. I think over time I've gotten better at that. I think I've gotten more mellow, maybe less, pushing people super hard, which in my early days I was known for. But now, thinking more of the long term and probably a more thoughtful manager than I was in my young days.
Bill Gates has been involved in preventing the spread of dangerous diseases for more than 20 years. His foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, works on solutions to develop inexpensive medications and vaccines to treat persistent infectious diseases such as HIV, polio, and malaria. The Gates Foundation's Global Health Division aims to reduce inequities in health by developing new tools and strategies to reduce the burden of infectious disease and the leading causes of child mortality in developing countries. Bill's work with the foundation led him to predict the current pandemic during a famous 2015 TED Talk.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war.
I think one of the wonderful things probably about your life is that you probably come across so many interesting people. Tell me about 1 or 2 of the most interesting people you've been fortunate enough to sit down with.
Well, this year I got to know Rashida Jones, that was completely new to me. And it's been a lot of fun. We're similar in that we like to study things. We have very different backgrounds. She's, an artist in every way, writer, performer. I'm just a, science, math type person, but it was fun to talk about big questions with her.
I know one of the things when President Trump won somewhat unexpectedly given the polls in 2016, you said, hey, everyone should go see whoever the new president is, and we should engage with that person and see if we can be of good counsel and good advice. How well were you able to collaborate with President Trump in the midst of this pandemic, given that global health is something you've thought about for a long time?
My goal was to suggest that there are a lot of innovations, including in vaccines, that he could bring his name and his influence to bear on. Things like a universal flu vaccine, an HIV vaccine. And I did bring up pandemics at that time. Unfortunately, I wasn't persuasive enough. That did not become a priority for the U.S. government. In fact, some of the work in that area actually got de-staffed. So I'll try again. We've got new leadership coming in, and I think President Biden will be more open to this, working with the world to cut down diseases and being ready for the next pandemic.
I know you've been focusing on the question of pandemics for a long time. What has surprised you the most about this particular pandemic?
We've had, by all measures, one of the worst pandemics of any country in the entire world. I would have expected the U.S. to lead the way in terms of getting the testing ramped up and making sure that the numbers never got very large. And I would have expected the CDC to be the voice explaining how things like masks really do make a huge difference.
Are there other parts of the world who you think we can learn from who did a particularly good job in responding to COVID-19?
South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Hong Kong, most of Asia have not had as bad an epidemic, and they've been able to, even when the infection rates are fairly low, to get incredible compliance on things like mask wearing.
And even beyond mask wearing and the vaccine, are there one or two other significant things that you would love to see us aggressively consider?
Well, our behavior is what creates this exposure. And I know people are fatigued, but behavior is super important. We're hoping that this therapeutic called monoclonal antibodies can prove to work out. All these tools are coming right. We wish we'd had them at the beginning. Even new ways of doing testing are going to start to show up, but mostly that'll be valuable for the next pandemic.
How do you see that next pandemic?
We may, have to be a lot better next time this happens. Very unpredictable. We have to have better surveillance out there. If we'd caught in the month of December exactly what was going on, it might not have spread to so many countries.
And do you see collaboration with China? Because this time around, it felt like there wasn't strong enough collaboration with China.
U.S.-China is challenging. I do think the new president will take us back into the WHO, which is that coordinating body and plays a very important role. So that'll be, super helpful. A general view that by working with each other, that is a way of helping America. I think the new president has that more of a mindset as opposed to a very zero-sum, if you're doing well, it must be because I was too nice to you point of view.
Bill, we ever going to see you in office? Are you ever going to consider public service as an elected official or appointed to a cabinet role?
No, that's not for me. My role at the foundation is what I enjoy and what I think I'm well suited to. But I sure encourage talented people. There's, whether it's working for the government or elected office, there's a bit of a vacuum. We need new thinking. We can't get cynical about those jobs. Those are super important. And, we've been going up in diversity a bit in those jobs, but nowhere as much as we'd like to see.
One of the most interesting things about this horrible moment is the amount of cooperation. Do you have that kind of optimism about medical collaboration across countries and across institutions going forward?
It's been a global cooperation because it's kind of humanity versus the virus. So it shouldn't, drive us apart. The scientists, the private sector, I'm very impressed with how they stepped up.
Talk to me about the rollout of the vaccine. I mean, one of the things people had some concern about is whether or not conspiracy theories and other things would prevent people from adopting the vaccine. Do you feel like that some of that has been addressed and that we're on a better trajectory in terms of people's willingness to try it when it's available?
The conspiracy theories have not died down in terms of, why we're making this vaccine. Is there some plot behind this that myself or Fauci are somehow involved in? That's all untrue. I worry that it will make people more hesitant. We need over 70% of people to take the vaccine to really have the numbers of infections drop dramatically. So at least we don't have to get, anywhere near to 100%. But that's still, it'll be a test of the messaging, figuring out who's trusted. We should track, are there geographies or communities, ethnicities that are being more reluctant, and who would they listen to about the importance of not only protecting yourself, but protecting other people.
Be fearless! We can do it! I believe in you! We can do it faster!
The Our Home is the training ground for her dreams policy. Insure carefully. Dream fearlessly.
Bill, talk to me a little bit about Black Lives Matter. Seattle, where you live, has been one of the hot spots where that conversation has been kind of joined in earnest. Lots of young people, like your 3 children, have been thinking about it a lot, talking about it a lot. What have you learned? What are you thinking about when it comes to not only what's happened, but where we can go from here on questions of race and racial justice?
Yeah, my daughter took me down to the CHOP, which was the protest area, and showed me, what was going on down there. So definitely, a lot of anger about, the historical mistreatment and, not doing enough to look at the justice system, the educational system, to get rid of these disparities. And sadly, even in COVID itself, we saw this huge disparity in the infection and even the death rates, where both Blacks and Hispanics had significantly more risk.
Well, the coronavirus doesn't discriminate, yet the ACLU is out with startling numbers that show Black people are dying at a higher rate from the virus.
You can see African Americans represent 41% of COVID-19 deaths.
Our foundation is a great group that thinks a lot about these issues, both because our health work is mostly in Africa, our education work is mostly in inner city schools, with a real emphasis on closing the gap of the Black students in the inner city with the high standards that they need to be able to go to college and complete college. So it caused us to step back, double down a lot of these inequity investments that we make. We strengthen our partnership with the historically Black colleges with some specific supports to them, studied all the textbook work we do to see, does that work for low-income minority students or not? But, it was an awakening to see that something that brutal could still happen in our country.
Is there something bold here, Bill, that you think we should consider as a country, or maybe even as a global society, to deal with something as brutal, as you said, as the systemic racism that is sadly, been part of the fabric of the country and to some extent most of the world's societies?
Well, certainly the idea that, if somebody has a record of not doing the key part of their job, which is, treating people well, we've got to reform how that's looked at and understand why that relationship between the police and these communities is often not very functional. Honestly, I'm not an expert enough to know, does that mean we need more resources or shift resources over to other things? I'm going to listen very carefully to the best thinkers on that. The area that our foundation is strongest in is the education piece. The kids who are at such incredible risk of ending up in the jail system, which things like the new Jim Crow is compared to that system of discrimination from the late 1800s. If they drop out of school, their chance of eventually ending up in prison, if you're a Black male from the inner city, it's over 60%. And that's just unacceptable. That society-wide is meaning that, as fathers, as members of those communities, that creates a cycle there. And so how do you interrupt it? We've already made a lot of grants along this theme, but we have more to learn.
Be fearless! We can do it! I believe in you! We can do it faster!
The Our Home is the training ground for her dreams policy. Insure carefully. Dream fearlessly.
Bill, we turn the page to one of the other things you said you're thinking a lot about, which is climate change. President-elect Biden has said that's going to be one of his 4 priorities. What makes you optimistic that we're going to make some progress on climate change?
Given that we have more people who care about climate, that intention, we need to build on that with an actual plan. Now, it's going to have to be somewhat bipartisan because for long-term investments, you can't think, okay, I'll only do this if one party's in charge. So how we reach a consensus on what level of funding can be done to get ready and do those hard parts, I think it's possible. I see young people from both parties putting this issue pretty high on their priorities.
One of the things we've been talking to a lot of folks on the show about is advice on dreaming fearlessly. And clearly you've been fortunate. You've had a career where you've dreamed fearlessly, not only about business, but about philanthropy. What advice do you give to young people who I'm sure turn to you a lot and ask, it's not going as well as I want. It doesn't seem as easy, as clear. How do I go about dreaming fearlessly, even when it seems that I'm not having the progress yet? What do you say to them? What's some of the best advice that you share?
Well, hopefully a kid can find something they enjoy learning, whether it's music or technology or history, something that when they look at a book and think about reading it, it's not like, oh God, I have to read that. But boy, I'm fascinated. And once you get into something, then the pieces start to fit together. Somebody who really knows sports or knows politics or science, it's amazing how it all becomes simpler to them. And yet that early energy, a little bit of self-confidence, then if you're lucky enough, you can shape your college where you get to pick your courses and then find a career that connects up to that. But, creating a sense of confidence and something that you gain passion towards, that's where you can even surprise yourself at the opportunities that generates.
Last time we were together, you talked to me about CRISPR. You told me that CRISPR was some of the most exciting technology. You had visited the Broad Institute, and you talked to me a little bit about that. Talk to me a little bit about one or two of the pieces of science or technology that we should have our eye on, but that hasn't gone mainstream yet.
CRISPR is still making great progress. It will play a role in fixing gene defects, things like sickle cell, which we haven't had good treatments for, even in the United States, not to mention in Africa. Early cancer detection, you're going to see huge breakthroughs there where we use this DNA sequencing where we can take a sample of your blood every year and find even the slightest hint that you might be at risk and catch that very early. A company like Illumina is actually out in front on that. There are companies working on things like obesity drugs. The amount we're learning in biology makes this the golden age that there will be better interventions. I have a child who's in medical school, so I'm enjoying learning with her the latest about what we know. And every disease that comes along, even COVID, helps us learn about the immune system, how to make vaccines, how to make antibodies that are cheap. So although the digital innovation gets the most focus, and that continues to go at full speed. These things in biology, I think people will be surprised. We can improve the quality of life a lot by diagnosing better and then having new treatments.
Talk to me a little bit about the economy. I saw you and Warren and Charlie Munger together about a year ago, and it was right as the Democratic nomination was heating up. And obviously, Bernie Sanders, senator from Vermont, was talking a lot about socialism versus capitalism. How would you like to see capitalism reformed, improved, optimized going forward?
Yeah, I've written about various ways that you could collect more taxes from the rich without completely disturbing the wonderful incentive system that we have, particularly in the United States, where you've had a lot of entrepreneurship. And so, within what I'd still call capitalism, I think we can get more resources to the government without killing that, drive towards innovation that's made the U.S. a leader. Very important for us strategically to stay strong in that respect. Some proposals would go too far in my view, but there's room to have more equity and still the magic of our competitive economy and the breakthroughs that we are still by far the leader in.
Bill, thank you so much for joining me, and congrats on your upcoming book, and I hope you'll stop by when the book's out.
You bet. Thanks.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Bill Gates. Appreciated how expansive he was. Was intriguing to hear him talk about the conspiracy theories that have come his way and sadly keep growing. Enjoyed the fact that he not only did he talk about police reform, but he talked about listening and learning. I thought that was important. I wish we had more time on the question of capitalism and how that should change and could change. Hopefully I'll see him again in the spring and we'll talk about that more. And really appreciated his notions around how we're going to deal with future pandemics, which, as he said, could be even more lethal, which is scary, but I'm glad that we're thinking about it in that way. Hey, I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you want to get more of this, the podcast goes the full length, so make sure you check out the podcast. This is a good one to do so. Hey, tell your friends about this if you're enjoying the show, and don't forget, always subscribe. Good to see you. I'll see you again. Hey, tune into the Carlos Watson Show. It's like no other. You're going to enjoy it every weekday on YouTube.